Hello, and welcome to the Baker Lab Help Desk for Boxcar. Boxcar can be kind of intimidating to install depending on what type of operating system you're using. However, once you do have it installed, it's pretty simple to use. First, plug in your Hobo. If you're using a USB adapter cable, you need to make sure that your computer is looking for your Hobo in the right place. Do this in the Edit Preferences menu. Under the logger serial port, choose which COM port your USB cable is installed to. If you're using a USB port and you don't know what I'm talking about, please see our tutorial on using the USB to serial adapter cable. If you're using a regular serial cable, then you don't have to worry about this step. Boxcar will find your Hobo on its own. To launch your logger, click this button here. This screen tells you everything you need to know about your Hobo. First, you need to give your test a name. Choose something that's relevant to the project title, and you should probably number your Hobos or give them separate names so that you can tell which one is which. I'm going to call mine Baker Test 1. Next, choose the interval that you want your data logger to take data at. This could be anywhere from several hours down to half a second. I'm going to choose a really low interval. Every 10 seconds. In the parentheses here, it tells you how long you can take data while taking it at this interval. So if I take data every 10 seconds, I can leave my Hobo out for 3 days, 18 hours, and 19 minutes before it fills up its internal memory. This screen tells you what you can measure using the Hobo that you have, and your battery life. Battery life takes a really long time to wear down, so you can probably launch your Hobos for even several hours or a day if you're down to this mark right here. If it's very low in the red, you should take it back to Baker and we'll give you a different one. This box right here tells your data logger to overwrite the data it's already taken if you leave it out longer than it can manage. So, for instance, if I left my data logger taking data every 10 seconds for 4 days, then it would wrap around and overwrite the data that it took at the beginning. Chances are this isn't going to happen unless you're taking a lot of data points over a really long amount of time. So you want to keep that in mind whether this is checked or not. This checkbox is your best friend when you're launching more than one Hobo. You want your Hobos to start taking data at exactly the same time and at the same interval. So how you do this when you want to launch them one at a time from your computer is you set a delayed start. It will let you choose any day, an hour, and the time on these is a 24-hour clock. So, for instance, if I wanted to launch this at 1 p.m., it would be 13:00:00. This way, you can launch multiple Hobos that all start at the same time, and that way your data points on your graph output will all line up, and you'll be able to handle your data a lot easier. This last button lets you choose which channels the data logger is recording from. The Hobo that I have connected is a 4-channel external Hobo. It can take 4 different channels at once. I can check all of them if I want, or just one, and choose what I want to measure. Some Hobos will allow you to take light, others will allow you to take temperature or relative humidity. So you want to pick which ones that you're using for your study. In addition, if you're not using all of the channels that your Hobo is capable of recording, you might want to leave them all on and see what other kind of data sets you can get. You might find something that's interesting or another direction your study might take. When you're done, click Apply. Okay, now you're ready to launch. Hit the Start button. This is just reminding me that I can turn on channels on and off. It's kind of annoying. And another thing to keep in mind is that if you launch your Hobo a second time before doing a readout and taking the information onto your computer, you'll actually end up overwriting everything that you've already done. So make sure that you have read out your Hobos before you launch them a second time. And now it's going to prompt me to unplug the Hobo before I hit OK. This step is important because if you don't unplug it before moving on, you might screw up your readings. Okay, now you can post your Hobo wherever you're taking data. When you're done recording data, plug your Hobo back in and hit the readout button. Again, remember to unplug your Hobo before pressing OK. And Boxcar will prompt you for a place to save your data in. I've made myself my own folder. And this lets you choose between which data set you want to display, whether it's in degrees Fahrenheit or degrees Celsius. So this is your basic readout screen. I'm going to expand it so it's easier to see. Now this screen can be very useful. While Boxcar does let you export data to Excel and to print files, these graphs can be really useful if you have multiple sets of data and you're just trying to figure out what's going on in the space that you're taking data points in. Useful navigation tools are pretty much the same as in a lot of Microsoft products. You have the hand that will let you move back and forth. The zoom tool, which will let you zoom in if you click on that point, or if you control click, hold down control and click at the same time, it will let you zoom back out. Also the zoom tool will allow you to drag a box over an area and zoom in on a specific part of the data set that you're interested in. This button right here will take you back to your original viewpoint that gets in all of your data. You can toggle how your data set is displayed with these two buttons right here. You can use lines to connect the points and turn the points on and off. So if I want to, I can just get that set of data right there or leave them connected. Editing things in this is really easy. If you want to change the formatting on anything, which you are able to do, simply choose the arrow tool and double click on it. So this gives me properties for this axis. That's great. It's temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. I don't really care about that. That's going to go away. You can choose which side it's on. This time I want it on the other side of the table. And I'm going to make it red to call it out. This one will let you choose how often you have tick marks on your graph and if you want grids or not. So this can make it a lot easier to find out what sort of correlations you have between different data sets over time. Play around with it a little. You can also format the other axis, which has no units at the moment, so I'm going to call it time, and leave it at that. So that's now down here. You can do the same thing with the data set itself. And this one is something that you want to note because you can choose how big your points are and what shape they are in. And this choice right here is something that you want to note because the zero spacing is default, and that just puts your data points wherever they belong on the graph. But if you choose greater than 0, it will smooth out your data points into an average, and it will allow you to see the larger trend without having to look at every tiny little dot. And you have pretty much the same other options, changing your color, change what it's labeled as, or if you have multiple data sets, like for instance if I had temperature but I had also read out like relative humidity, I would have that option to change axes for this graph right here. One last thing before we move on is if you double click on the chart itself, you will get the View Properties box. Now this one just has a couple of other formatting points in it, but one important one is the Show Legend box. And this is important because when you have multiple sets of data, you're going to want to have a legend so you can tell which one is which. Now you can view the individual data points and the specific information by clicking this Toggle View Details button. And this will give you just a list of everything that the logger recorded. You can export that list to a text file by pressing this button here and clicking Export. And I'm going to save it in the same folder as my last one. And when I go to open that up, here's all my data points. And this is really easy to just copy and paste into another program that you're using to graph it or to leave it in a chart for your report files or whatever you're using. You can also, with this export feature, choose to export a multi-file. And this is useful. For instance, I chose to take data points every second. So if I wanted to break this down by every 10 seconds and get a readout for those 10-second blocks, I could just type in 10 and it would take those 10 points and click OK. And I'm going to save it in the same place, but I'm going to save it under a different name. So I know that this is the file that I chunked up. And one of the problems with this is if I had left this with as Baker Test 1, it might be kind of confusing because it numbers each file that it exports sequentially. So I would get Baker Test 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, and that might get confusing. So I'm giving it a new name. And here are my data sets. And here's the first 10 seconds of data that I got. And then so that's another way of choosing what you get from your X feature. Now you can also export directly into an Excel file. And this is extremely useful if you want to graph in Excel or you want to manipulate your data in some other way. And so you click on this button right here and export. And I'm going to call this Baker Excel file. Now when I go back to my folder, I have a Baker Excel file. I can just open that and I'll have all my data. Now one thing that you might get if you're using the new version of Excel is that you'll get this window right here. I've had this several times, and as far as I can tell, you don't actually lose any data, but it's an artifact of compatibility issues. So you can just click OK on that. And as you can see, I still have all of my times are correct and all of my data all out perfectly. And then it also gives you other information about the logger that might be useful for you when you're trying to keep track of what's going on. That this one's temperature and the times that it was collected between and how long it lasted and all of that. So that's extremely useful. Okay, now you're set. You know pretty much everything you need to work on a project with Boxcar. If you get stuck on something specific, there is a help window. And if you get too stuck, you can also come and visit us in Baker, and we'll try to help you work through whatever you're having trouble with. Good luck.